The traitor Astartes rampage across the stars, making foes of all who oppose their will. Hungry for warfare, as their blades and bolters delight in slaughter, entire species have been sundered by their wrath over millennia of conflict. Yet among all, those who worship the blood god of the ruinous pantheon are undoubtedly the most barbaric of such marauders. For today, we shall elucidate the warbands of chaos devoted to the Lord of Skulls, the pawns of the Hunter of Souls, the warbands of Khorne.
Tell me why, Father. Why stand with the arch-traitor?
I do not stand with Horus. I stand against the Emperor. Do you understand, Khorraga? I am free now. Free.
The founding legions of the Adeptus Astartes served as the first unified examples of the Emperor's conquest of the galaxy. Each legion revered for their battle prowess and skill at arms. And whilst there are some legions who are renowned as duelists, there is only one regarded not for their finesse, but butchery. A damned legion now under the thrall of the ruinous powers that delights in the spilling of blood and screams of the dying. The 12th Legion of the Adeptus Astartes, the World Eaters. Unlike their brethren of the first foundings of Holy Terror, the 12th Legion of the Adeptus Astartes would not recruit from a specific region of the Throne World. Speculated to draft its members from only the most aggressive of potential candidates, all that can be confirmed is that the Legion's initial victories would be characterized by their savagery. Deployed during the Sa'afric Liberation during the Unification Wars, the 12th Legion would shortly after be held in reserve for the remainder of the unification of Terra and conquest of the Sol System. Whether to reduce civilian casualties of war, a need to keep reinforcements to support other legions, or to be quickly deployable should the need to quell disloyal elements within the Imperium, is unknown. Their hunger for war and dedication to the Emperor unquestionable, they would be dubbed the Warhounds by the Master of Mankind, a title which the 12th Legion would bear with pride, adopting the Red Hound as their sigil in his honor. With the majority of the Space Marine legions deployed within expedition fleets during the early stages of the Great Crusade, the Warhounds would be sent to quell the insurrections at the colony rebellion of Cerberus. Sent personally by the Emperor, the Warhounds would unleash his wrath and take no prisoners in the persecution of the colony. The Imperial Army detachment sent alongside them would be shocked at their merciless butchery of the populace and report massive casualties to be incurred on both sides of the engagement. Thereafter split into independent companies, thousands of Astartes strong in number, the Warhounds would be held in reserve to assist Crusade forces and other Astartes, such as the 1st Legion, Iron Warriors, and Space Wolves, in their efforts to bring planets into compliance. Garnering a reputation as near feral shock troopers whom would turn the tide at the bloodiest engagements, with slaughter, victorious or otherwise, the constant outcome. With the Warhound service during the Great Crusade, reports would indicate their willingness to turn on their allies, culling entire human regiments as a result of their performance in battle. Such reports would be difficult to verify due to the Legion's deliberate distancing from other Astartes legions. Consolidating their forces into the 13th Expeditionary Fleet, the Warhounds would add additional Imperial forces to their fleet at the muster world of Bot. Comprising support elements of the most questionable of forces, the Warhounds would incorporate the Legio Audax Titans, Numen gun clans, and abhuman troops of feral worlds. The conduct of such forces making them distrusted by other fleets, the War Council would intentionally group such disparate forces to fight alongside the Warhounds, with the intention to create a force content with total annihilation in mind. Dubbed the Bloody 13th, the Expeditionary Fleet would serve with infamy as the single most remorseless and dispassionate consignment of the Imperium's might. Yet such a reputation would only grow bloodier with the discovery of the 12th Legion's Primarch, Angron. The Primarch of the 12th grew on the downtrodden yet technologically proficient planet of Nuceria. Ruled by an elite class of nobles, the young Primarch would be forced to fight as a gladiator for the nobles' entertainment. Facing cyber-enhanced warriors and winning his many bouts, the nobles would attempt to surgically and cybernetically enhance the enslaved Primarch. All attempts would fail, with the exception of one: the psychosurgical brain implantation of the accursed Butcher's Nails. Enhancing the Primarch's aggression to new heights, Angron would form a fellowship of gladiators to fight at his side and revolt against their oppressors, naming them the Eaters of Cities. Vastly outnumbered, the gladiators would fail in their attempt. His doomed band of warriors escaping the gladiatorial arena and retreating to the nearby mountains, they would be surrounded by 5 armies of the nobles' forces, outnumbering them 10 to 1. Yet fate would intervene, with the Emperor of Mankind watching his son's plights and intervening in his time of need. Offering Angron the chance to lead his legion as a general of his armies, Angron would refuse the Emperor's offer, resolving to die at the side of his gladiators. However, the Emperor would deny his son's wishes and teleport him to safety prior to the assault by the nobles' armies. Angron's followers would be massacred, scarring the Primarch of the 12th forevermore. Resentment to the Emperor now entrenched within his very being, Angron would soon after be transferred to a vessel containing his Genesons, the Warhounds. Uniquely amongst the Primarchs of the Imperium, Angron's unification with his legion would be marked with violence. Enraged due to the loss of his Nucerian followers, Angron would murder all officers of the Warhounds who attempted to speak with him, including the Legion Master, Gear, with the captain of the 8th Company, Khan, being the only to survive his interaction with his Primarch. Forming a tenuous bond with his Genefather, Angron would assume command of his legion with Khan's introduction. Salute the one whose soldiers were named the Eaters of Cities, with Captain Driga remarking,
Primarch, General, your warriors were Eaters of Cities, Lord, but with you to command us, the Warhounds will be the Eaters of Worlds.
World Eaters. World Eaters.
So shall you be then, little brothers. Come with me then, World Eaters.
Assuming command of his now renamed 12th Legion, Angron would muster his forces at the planet of Bot. Instructing his legion to incorporate his experiences as a gladiator into their battle doctrines, the Astartes would undergo duels within fighting pits. Earning their scars anew, the Terran traditions of the Legion would be erased, with any Space Marine unable to pass these new tests of metal dying in the process. The Legion would repaint their armor with the fanged Maw symbol of the World Eaters. Campaigning throughout the stars to aid in the Great Crusade, Angron would give his legion a single Nucerian day to achieve victory in any engagement he would send them to persecute. This grueling 31-hour task a test the World Eaters would be eager to achieve in order to gain favor with their Primarch. Ordering his apothecaries to construct replicas of his Butcher's Nails implant, Angron would oversee the initial implantations of the devices amongst his Astartes. Proving fatal in their initial designs, Angron would be disgusted with the weakness of his Genesons and flee from his legion for 2 years until returning at the behest of Captain Khan. Unable to meet their Primarch's deadlines, the World Eaters would be punished for not achieving compliance of their goals. Ordering each Astartes of the Legion to form into groups of 10, one within each group would be killed by the other 9 to purge the weakest of their ranks. With Angron often spiraling into frenzied rages that would cost the lives of his men, the Legion's librarians would often subdue their Primarch from his bloodlusts. With the perfection of the Butcher's Nails design by Apothecary Garland Surlak, divisions within the Legion would be formed. Centurion Mago would lead a revolt against his Primarch, yet be slain. Unified once more, the implantations of the Butcher's Nails would begin, with the first successful implantation endured by Khan the Legion would adopt the Nails almost in their entirety. With the Legion's implantation of the Nails, the demands of their Primarch would swiftly be achieved. Marked by the Genna massacre, the World Eaters would murder the entire planet's population within a single night. Now synonymous with annihilation, the mere mention of the Legion's deployment would be enough to bring worlds into compliance. Yet such wanton butchery would bring the ire of the other Astartes legions, with even Primarch of the Ultramarines, Rebute Guilliman, decrying the Legion's actions during the cleansing of Arigata. The Emperor of Mankind, upon hearing of the Butcher's Nail surgeries, would command Primarch of the Space Wolves, Leman Russ, to confront Angron and demand the removal of the Nails within the World Eaters, resulting in a bloody confrontation between the 6th and 12th Legions. The stalemate would be ended with Russ giving the command to retreat from the engagement against his irredeemable brother. The Emperor would intervene personally and command Angron to travel to the northern fringes of the galaxy to combat the Xenos within. Though intended as a punishment, this action would allow the World Eaters to freely operate without the scrutiny of Imperial oversight. As such, the 12th Legion would not abandon their bloody practices or remove their implants. The Emperor would eventually recall the World Eaters to the human lines of the Great Crusade and order his favored son, Horus Lupercal, to oversee their conduct and mentor Angron in restraint. Yet with the corruption of the War Master by the ruinous powers, such a decision would prove to be a fatal error. Drawing his traitorous brethren to side against the Emperor, Horus Lupercal would have the least difficulty in convincing Angron. Already embittered to the Imperium and his Gene Father, Angron would be amongst the first to stand with the War Master. Purging the Legion of loyalist elements during the Istvan Free atrocity, the World Eaters would serve as the single-minded berserkers of the traitor forces. Fearless in their slaughter of the Imperium, the World Eaters would further aid the traitor war effort during the Dropside Massacre of Istvan V, Shadow Crusade, and Siege of Terra. With each engagement led by their Primarch, the World Eaters would instill terror into the hearts and minds of humans and Astartes alike. Their relentless charges and savagery only bolstered with Angron's ascension to a demon prince of the ruinous powers. The World Eaters would seek to emulate their Gene Father as devoted servants of the blood god, Khorne. Instrumental during the Siege of Terra, the World Eaters would be the first to breach the defenses of the Imperial Palace. Yet despite their fury, the traitors would be driven from Holy Terra with the defeat of the War Master, Horus Lupercal. Retreating into the Eye of Terror, Angron would command his remaining forces to separate into small warbands as they fled. Lacking in supplies, reliable leadership, and badly scarred from the siege, many World Eaters would be driven mad by the fullest extent of the Butcher's Nails, such Astartes being culled from the Legion or crippled and interred within the chassis of dreadnoughts. The command structure of the World Eaters would collapse. During the Legion Wars, the 12th Legion would further deteriorate, fragmenting the Legion into smaller warbands which for 10 millennia still carve paths of slaughter across the expanse of space. Yet with the opening of the accursed Great Rift, the World Eaters have reformed into formations not seen since the Heresy. Commanded by both Kharn the Betrayer and the Demon Prince, Angron, the World Eaters have led blood crusades and invasions of Imperial strongholds throughout the galaxy. With Angron last seen during the invasion of the First War for Armageddon, the Khornite hosts strike suddenly and without relent across Imperial space. Despite Angron's banishment by the Grey Knights on the world of Armageddon, reports suggest his return to real space to be imminent. The Red Angel once more harrying the Imperium, only the most valiant and steadfast champions of humanity shall be able to face such a monolith of rage. The gene seed of the World Eaters is now mutated beyond all specifications outlined by the Imperium. Usable only to an extent by the Chaos Legion's Berserker surgeons, it is theorized by scholars of the Imperium that the World Eaters' gene seed had been corrupted from the Legion's inception, though others claim that the Warhounds were not damned from the start, and that their fall is solely the fault of their Primarch Angron and his butcher's nails. All that can be asserted truthfully is that the 12th Legion's genetic makeup resulted in a primal need for violence and aggression, their bloodlust not entirely dependent on their nail-induced rage. Collared by strict codified disciplinary actions and structures, the Warhounds would restrain their bloodlust with the tempered chains of their commanding officers. Ascending the ranks by virtue of their strength, the officers of the Warhounds would be relied upon to mete out punishments which as such require the capability to best their lower-ranked brethren. With no value given to deeds outside of the battlefield, the 12th Legion would be commanded by only the mightiest champions of their legion. Cowards would be slain by their brothers for their weakness, and worse would befall the Legion's foes. Surrender of any type would be met with extermination of captured combatants, yet the Legion would make a sport of sending their prisoners of war to the dueling pits to die a warrior's death. Settling disagreements within the Legion solely through trial by combat, promotions would even be achieved by lower-ranked Astartes by besting their superiors. Invariably, the loser of such duels would be slain. Masters of every variety of hand-to-hand weaponry, the Legion would become synonymous with one weapon above all, the chain axe. Following the example of their Primarch, the World Eaters would delight in their preferred weapon's ability to shred their enemies into fragments and adorn their armor in spattering patterns of blood. Such a reputation would be gained of the chain axe that its use would spread to other legions, imbuing their weapons with significance only in their ability to kill. Once a weapon would break under the stresses of war, it would be discarded. Regarded as wasteful by the other legions of Astartes, the World Eaters would see broken weapons as portents of ill omens and rarely name their weapons or take steps to maintain them. With fighting pits sanctioned within the Legion by Angron, rituals would form around the Astartes' rules of engagement, allowing for such challenges to change into blood rites with the Legion's corruption by the ruinous powers. These rituals would easily transition into blood sport worships to their patron god, Khorne. Each opponent slain, a pleasing tribute to the foul being, the Astartes of the 12th bask in the glory of their slaughter with unabashed joy and devotion. Favoring close quarters combat, the World Eaters would only grow more bloodthirsty and savage with their reunion with their Primarch and eventual descent into chaos. Seeing minimal changes in command structure with their transition from Warhounds to World Eaters, the Legion would be comprised of several chapters known as echelons. Bolstering their melee strategies with support elements such as Terminator squadrons and land speeders, the 12th Legion heavily relied on drop pod assaults aimed at the heart of enemy defenses. Ripping and tearing their enemies from within, the World Eaters would deploy with seeming disregard for their own mortality or self-preservation. Relying on their heavily armored transports, attrition would be the Legion's most practical and commonplace strategy. Though it is unknown to what extent the Legion's might was during the Great Crusade or Horus Heresy, estimates suggest the Legion's might to have peaked at 150,000 Astartes prior to the commencement of the atrocity of Isstvan III, with their numbers plummeting to 75,000 following the Legion's betrayal of its loyalist kin. Offsetting their losses in both lives and materials with the age of Forge Worlds such as Sarum, most engagements would prevent the Astartes of the 12th Legion from achieving veterancy or battle-forged specialized formations. A notable exception being the Devourer bodyguards of the Primarch Angron, consisting of 12 battle-hardened and tested Astartes. Acceptance to join such a prestigious honor guard earned through ritual combat. The Butcher's Nails implants deteriorating the sanity and discipline of the Legion, the organized formations of the World Eaters would become impractical and superfluous, with even the Legion's Librarius disintegrating due to the Nails' incompatibility with the Psykers of the Legion due to overpowering their surges of power or causing brain embolisms. Refusing to undergo the fatal procedure, the remaining Librarians of the Legion would be shunned by their battle brothers, but nonetheless still serve the Legion unfettered by the Emperor's decree of the Edict of Nicaea. the final remnants of the Legion's librarians perishing in their attempt to prevent their Primarch from transforming into a demon prince of the ruinous powers. The remainder of the Legion's voluntary implantation of the nails, bringing them closer to their Primarch as an act of sharing his burden. The Astartes would increase their pain tolerance and aggression in equal measure, though each individual Space Marine would experience the nails' effects to different degrees. All would nonetheless share their mutual self-destruction. Continuing this trend of continual decay, the Legion would not survive the Horus Heresy unscathed. Broken into independent warbands, the World Eaters operate under the command of their respective Chaos Lords. Such notable warbands including the Butcher Horde, Skull Takers, Gladiator Group 138, and the Gore Hunters. Due to the Legion's storied history of enormous fatalities, the World Eaters have always employed methods to keep recruitment a constant, no matter their fighting capabilities. Recruiting from huge varieties of worlds, World Eater Astartes are often drafted from feral and feudal worlds, with only the Ultramarines Legion comparable in their diversity of warriors spanning from many worlds of the galaxy. Prior to the Horus Heresy, Primarch Angron would donate his own genetic material to his Legion's apothecaries and personally screen aspirants of the Legion in order to streamline gene seed implantation and grafting of organs. Primarily trained on the muster world of Bot, World Eater recruits would undergo live fire exercises and training before being dispatched to the Legion's expedition fleets. Due to recruitment from disparate worlds, the Legion would devise a derivative second language of Gothic to facilitate communication within the Legion. Combining 36 native languages within the Legion's ranks, this so-called bastardized tongue would be widespread within the World Eaters and prove crucial to aid in commanding the ragtag warriors of the 12th. Collaborating with the Word Bearers Legion to engineer biovat-grown warriors, the apothecaries of the 12th Legion would create abominable warriors at a rapid pace. Creatures of pure rage, instilled with the perception of surviving endless wars. The surplus of warriors would prove useful with the Legion's commitment to the traitor war effort. However, with time and their defeat fighting the Loyalists of Terra, the World Eaters would struggle to replenish their numbers. Bot would be annihilated at the hands of Ironhand Ironfather, Ortek Moore, leading to World Eater Berserker surgeons relying on transforming captured Loyalist Space Marines and Chaos Warband Astartes to replenish their losses. Though not all warbands of the World Eaters possess the knowledge or skill to replenish their casualties.
The Emperor needed a weapon that would never obey its own desires before those of the Imperium. He needed a weapon that would never bite the hand that feeds. The World Eaters were not that weapon. We've all drawn blades purely for the sake of shedding blood. And we've all felt the exaltation of winning a war that never even needed to happen. We are not the tame, reliable pets that the Emperor wanted. The wolves obey when we would not. The wolves can be trusted when we never could. They have discipline we lack, because their passions are not aflame with the butcher's nails buzzing in the back of their skulls. The wolves will always come to heel when called. In that regard, it is a mystery why they name themselves wolves. They are tame, collared by the Emperor, obeying his every whim. But a wolf doesn't behave that way, only a dog does. That is why we are the Eaters of Worlds and the Warhounds no longer.
The Berserkers of Scalafrax are a cornate warband of Chaos Space Marines. Drawn from the World Eaters Legion of yore, these rabid killers roam the Segmentum Obscurus in search of battles to sate their bloodlust. Forged within the tides of the Eye of Terror, following their humbling by the Loyalists during the Horus Heresy, the fragmenting of their legion upon the demon world of Scalafrax is forever remembered by the survivors of the conflict. Battling the Emperor's children as the pawns of rival deities struggled for power, the carnage wrought from the Battle of Scalafrax sundered its cities until the planet's core temperature forced a stalemate. Witness to the murder spree of the former equerry of the Red Angel, Khan. The being would henceforth forever be known as the Betrayer as he burned the World Eaters' shelters to the ground to drive them into the frigid war zones to face the Sons of the Phoenician. Withdrawing as among the largest portions of the World Eaters' Legion, their most infamous rampage would be made during the Siege of Thrax of 813.M41. The campaign led by the Chaos Lord, Zufar the Impaler, the survivors of Scalathrax initially refused to pledge their blades to the master of the Skulltaker's warband unless their own master fought him in single combat. Bereft of armor, Zufar beheaded the master of the Berserkers with his chain axe, assuming lordship of the Berserkers of Scalathrax until they were driven from Vrax Prime by Imperial forces. Clad in blood-red ceramite trimmed with brass, these scions of Khorne revel in thickening the sheen of their crimson with the blood of their foes. The symbol of their warband, a planet being devoured by a gigantic toothed maw, bears homage to their legion of origin, the World Eaters. Seemingly relieved of their command of the Butcher of Thrax, the Skulltakers continue to wander the void in search of skulls for the Skull Throne. The Blood Disciples are a Khornate warband of Chaos Space Marines. Descended from the 8th Company of the Emperor's Wolves chapter of Astartes, their defection during 888.M37 would be forewarned by a cryptic reading of the Emperor's Tarot. Venturing to the Gore worlds within the Eye of Terror, the 8th Company happened upon a hermit known as the Red Prophet, who proclaimed the Blood God's glory atop a pillar surging with ichor. Carving a path to the hermit using jump packs, the 8th Company felled the heretic atop his geyser of blood. Yet all who were spattered with such gore instantly fell to the thrall of Khorne. Known henceforth as the Blood Disciples, these Astartes pillage worlds within the Segmentum Obscurus, comprised overwhelmingly of Chaos Raptors. Clad in black ceramite trimmed with brass, the symbol of their chapter, a demonic white skull marked with a drop of blood, emphasizes their submission to the Lord of Rage. Seeking to absolve their sins made against the Blood God, their sundering of the Red Prophet drives the warband to earn redemption for their transgression. The Blood Gorged are a Khornate warband of Chaos Space Marines. Their rampage is heralded by the Skull Star, located within the Golgotha system of the Segmentum Ultima. The warband perceive the blazing solar entity as the divine manifestation of the Blood God. Braving the warp storms blocking their venture, the Blood Gorge set upon the hordes of cultists spread across the planets which orbit the Skull Star, constructing fortifications and idols to the Lord of Skulls, which now tower over the Thrall populace. First sighted during the 41st millennium, these warriors peculiarly prey upon their rivals of Chaos, rather than the subjects of the Imperium. Harrying followers of Tzeentch, Nurgle and Slaanesh, their worship given to inferior gods are punished by the Bloodgorged for their misplaced faith. The cults of Khorne pledge to aid their endeavors, preparing ambushes and labors in their name, should any stand in the way of their rampages, intended for their rival Chaos warbands. They shall not be spared reprisal. Scuttling an Emperor's Children fleet during 183.M41, inadvertently saving the populace of the hive world of Pyros, and crippling Huron Blackheart's strongholds of the Maelstrom during 938.M41. The demands of the Blood God to aid Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade nonetheless exemplifies that such a warband is not an ally of the Imperium's goals. Clad in brass and crimson ceramite trimmed with gunmetal grey, the symbol of their warband, an elongated black sigil of Khorne on a field of crimson, shows their clear devotion to the Blood God. Patrolling the domains of the Eye of Terror in search of prey, their mission to destroy all rivals to their patron's ideals, wants for no lack of targets. The Brazen Beasts are a Khornate warband of Chaos Space Marines. Once known as the Golden Blades chapter during their service to the Imperium, their downfall to madness began during the 37th millennium while defending the Fortress of Intolerance on the world of Gahala. Defacing their panoplies as they began blood rituals to praise the Lord of Rage, the corrupted Astartes began to trap demons within vehicles which remained functional within the warzone. Opposed to the myriad other followers of the gods of chaos, these berserkers fight alongside heavily armored demon engines with the largest in their possession being an imposing Lord of Skulls, whose visions of future conflict guide the warbands to its next battlefields. Worshipping the Gore Thunder cohort as skull cannons and soul grinders pulp their enemies into mulch. Their entourage of Mauler Fiends, Defilers, and Forge Fiends support the advance of their Astartes forces. Traversing the galaxy, aboard their Space Hulk, Oblivion Shadow, an entire coven of warpsmiths tend to the warband's demon engines when not campaigning as befits their overwhelming numbers. Clad in maroon ceramite trimmed with brass, the symbol of their warband, a skull affixed with the mark of Khorne on a field of crimson, exemplifies their pledge to serve the Blood God. Leaving nothing more than mangled corpses in their wake, these tamers of gargantuan monstrosities claim skulls aplenty for the Lord of Rage. The Butcher Horde are a Khornate warband of Chaos Space Marines. A coalition of World Eater Legion warbands led by the infamous equerry of Angron, Kharn the Betrayer. The foundational members of this creed consisted entirely of Khornate berserkers and has since burgeoned to myriad followers of the Eightfold Path. Whether Chaos Space Marines, Khornate cultists, demon princes of the Blood God, or ravenous demon engines, this frayed assemblage of killers are united by might alone, as the infamous former captain of the World Eaters harnesses their bloodthirsty nature to his will. Disinterested with forging an army of conquest, the simple delight of parting heads from necks is enough for the Betrayer's machinations, his warband assembling as they were drawn to his acts of slaughter, drenching the Eightfold Path in ichor to such an extent that demons of Khorne could not stand idly by. Spilling from tears in reality to feast on the carnage wrought by Kharn, the Butcher Horde, like moths to a flame, rallied by the side of the champion of Khorne, as the war zone of Sundered Reach acted alike to a beacon, drawing men to his side. As the blood rage subsided, Kharn beheld a warband of his own making, entire fleets of starships looming above the devastation wrought upon the Pandoric colonies, each housing lunatics aplenty who follow his orders. Seeking no power for himself, the Betrayer saw these miscreants and murderers not as subjects, but merely a deadly weapon to be wielded. The amassed strength of dozens of warbands barely kept in check as they began to rampage across the stars. Never intervening in petty squabbles between his men, nor quelling acts of violence among his fleet, the weak are continually weeded from the Butcher Horde's number, as might makes right. Each fallen subject's skull offered to the Blood God. At the side of their bloody avatar, none among this warband of killers could conceive of a higher calling to their patron god, both in life and death. Many capable Butcher Horde officers attempting to claim Kharn's skull as the ultimate trophy, their ambition proved to be their downfall, as many such craniums lie in the Blood God's throne to this day. Striking down usurpers almost daily as they made attempts on the Betrayer's life, the Chaos cultists in their retinue proclaim Khorne's praises as demon princes watch amusedly at the unworthy attempts to reach ascension. Infamous for their deployments of demon engines at the forefront of their engagements, Mauler Fiends, Defilers, Brass Scorpions, and even Lords of Skulls lead their advances as Hellbrutes lumber in their wake. Kharn's violent campaigns, legendary throughout the ranks of Chaos. During the Blood Torrent War of Ulsa, despite his chain axe Gorechild jamming and plasma pistol stalling from overuse, the Betrayer culled the defenders of the Mechanicus Factorum with his bare hands as thousands of mangled corpses clogged its mechanisms. Allying with Abaddon the Despoiler's Black Legion during his fell 13th Black Crusade, as Chaos Lord Cranon the Relentless deployed his renegade warband, the Crimson Slaughter, to aid the Diamor campaign of 999.M41, Kharn's Butcher Horde descended upon the world of Amethal. Combating the Blood Angels chapter defenders, Kharn sought to claim the skulls of among Sanguinius' most lauded sons as fitting offerings to the Skull Throne of Khorne. The havoc caused by the Betrayer weakening the barrier between the Immaterium and real space, requiring the intervention of the Grey Knights chapter to halt. Clad in blood-red ceramite, trimmed with gold and brass, their retaining of the sigil of the World Eaters Legion, a jagged maw devouring a planet, belies their pledge of fealty to the Red Angel when called upon to war. The aloof leadership of the bloody avatar of Khorne, uniting them in purpose. So long as the Betrayer continues his acts of annihilation, so too will his Butcher Horde enact atrocities in the name of the Blood God.
By thy wounds, know thy worth.
The Eights Guard are a Khornate warband of Chaos Space Marines. Their enigmatic origins are known to all outside the fold of their creed. What is known is that only those judged worthy by the Bloodthirster of unfettered fury, Gar-Karax, are marked with a brand on their flesh and permitted to fight by its side. Slowly forming into the Mark of Khorne with continued battles waged in its name, these members of Gar-Karax's cohort consist primarily of Khornate berserkers due to their fanatical devotion to the Taker of Skulls. Noted for their rampages made during the Threefold War of 784.M40, pitted against the White Scars Third Company and war host of Craftworld Ulthwé, their brief alliance made with the Wrath Warband, purging the Tau on the colony of Shaunesh during 793.M41, inevitably fell into mutually assured destruction with the Xenos' extermination. Claiming the planet of Almarit as a demon world during 988.M41, despite the valiant efforts of the Imperial Fists and Raven Guard chapters, the Warband also aided Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade, as they beset the Cadian Gate with the close of the 41st millennium. Clad in dark red ceramite, trimmed with bronze and adorned with black pauldrons and knee plates, each warrior marks runes on their left pauldron, which displays their squad marking and mimics their flesh rune. The symbol of their warband, a red combination of the 8-pointed star and Mark of Khorne upon a field of black, emphasizes fealty made to the Blood God. Those who fail to gain the endorsement of Gar-Karax falling on their own chainswords to cleanse them of shame. These unhinged zealots continue to butcher in the name of Khorne, as the notches on their flesh rune seek to form the full talisman of their patron. The Forge of Hate are a Khornate warband of Chaos Space Marines. Infamous as the single most vicious warband pledged in service to the Blood God, deranged cultists worship their deeds as they pillage shrine worlds for gold. Melting down their spoils to be crafted into their gleaming pauldrons, these warriors once pledged as part of Kharn the Betrayer's butcher horde would be abandoned during the Battle of Amithal during Abaddon the Despoiler's Diamor campaign. Clad in blood-red ceramite adorned with gold left arm plating, the symbol of their warband, a jagged maw devouring a planet, honors their former legion of the World Eaters. Destroyed along with their cultist thralls by Imperial defenders, their plunder was reclaimed from these willing pawns of the Black Legion. Gladiator Group 138 is a Khornate warband of Chaos Space Marines. Allied with the Demon Prince, Khor Megron, during the Ascended Wordbearer's assault of the Shrine World of Enderlim during 746.M41, this peculiar type of campaign emulated the Black Legion's dealings, belying Megron's power of manipulation. Beginning the campaign, bringing the hive world of Hones Crispin to heel, the Gladiators overran its largest hive city, Fort Crispin, claiming skulls aplenty for the Skull Throne. Turning their attentions to Enderlim, the Khornate berserkers charged through the Eagle Gate of the city of Adol. The valor of the Ultramarine second captain, Cato Sicarius, blunting their advance before impaling Khor Megron through the heart with his power sword. Clad in dark red ceramite, trimmed with black and bronze, the symbol of their warband, a fanged maw devouring a planet, honors their legion's infamous deeds. Present during the Crusade of Fire as part of the coalition of Anafrax the Fetid, known as the Servants of Ruin, their support given to the Narkmund Rift War of Harkened Worldclaimer forced Imperial opposition to flee. The Harvest are a Khornate warband of Chaos Space Marines. Peculiarly obsessed with defending outposts, given in praise to their patron rather than aggressively hunting its foes, as is commensurate with all warbands of the Lord of Skulls, their efforts must regardless be conducted in spectacularly gory spectacle. Launching rapid assaults to procure pre-made fortifications rather than build them themselves, these impatient siege experts pilfer bastions whether made by the Imperium, Orc hordes, or even Tyranids. Purging the Black Ravens chapter from the pages of history during 946.M41, as their fortress monastery fell to ruin. Their extinction was merely a prelude to the impending invasion of High Fleet Behemoth, to which the Harvest repelled in facing from the defenses of their slain foes. Clad in dark red ceramite, trimmed with bone white, their symbol of their patron, Khorne, is adorned with teeth-like arrows which descend from its maw. Pledging their might to aid Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade, as the distilled rage of the Blood God descended upon the Cadian Gate, the Harvest delighted in seizing the abandoned and lightly manned fortifications, which desperately fought to defend their domains. The Harvest Macabre, a Racornate warband of Chaos Space Marines. Part of the Diamor campaign of Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade, alongside Cranon the Relentless's Crimson Slaughter warband, these fell avatars of the Blood God laid waste to the Blood Angels and their mortal allies. Clad in dark red ceramite, trimmed with brass and silver, their adoption of the World Eater's sigil honors the legacy of their war-ravaged creed. Their last recorded efforts made upon the world of Aphemile, alongside the Butcher Horde of Khan the Betrayer. Their efforts to part the heads from the champions of the Blood Angels chapter weakened the barrier of the Immaterium to the material realm, requiring the intervention of the Grey Knights to oppose their fury. The Oblivion Butchers, a Racornate warband of Chaos Space Marines. A fragment torn from the World Eater Legion during Khan the Betrayer's actions upon Scalafrax. Their slaughter commit during the Diamor campaign of 999.M41, alongside Abaddon the Despoiler's Black Legion and Cranon the Relentless's Crimson Slaughter, ravaged the Diamor system to the point of ruin. Clad in dark red ceramite, trimmed with silver and brass, the symbol of their warband, the Mark of Khorne, upon a brass backdrop, elicits fear from those who face the wrath of these disciples of the Lord of Skulls. Joining Khad's Butcher Horde prior to the invasion of Amorphal, their combat made against the Blood Angels chapter defenders wrought such havoc that the Chamber Militant of the Ordo Malleus, the Grey Knights, intervened to seal the breach made between reality and the warp. The Sanctified, a Racornate warband of Chaos Space Marines. Abandoning their former legion, the Word-Bearers, in order to follow the doctrines of the Blood God alone. Their refusal to abandon the Siege of Terra, under the command of Lieutenant Helman Brish, eventually waned with the death of the War Master, Horus Lupercal. Following Helman's command, until his death during the 32nd millennium, this warband's uncanny ability to locate newly founded Imperial colonies and explorator fleets of the Mechanicus has allowed them to prey on such pilgrims for millennia to sustain their survival. Their demon monsters, devoted to the Lord of Skulls, summoning vast armies of bloodletters to aid their campaigns. Their own arch-sorcerer, Ezrath Kull, came close to ascending to the form of a demon prince of Khorne. Assassinating their failed champion due to the ritual's prevention by the Fire Angels chapter, upon the cemetery worlds of the Grand Al Ghul system, the apprentices of the arch-sorcerer fought for leadership of their warband, as the power vacuum left in his wake ravaged their numbers. Clad in red ceramite trimmed with silver, some within their ranks paint entire sections of their armor with black, the symbol of their warband, a flaming mark of Khorne, epitomizing their fury made in battle. Last seen during the Siege of Vrax, aiding the Skulltakers warband and their Chaos Lord, Zhuthor, the cunning warlord offered the Sanctified plentiful sacrifices in the tens of thousands, in efforts to summon Angraf the Unbound into real space. The Skullsworn are a Racornate warband of Chaos Space Marines. Comprised entirely of demonkin said to have struck the Imperium during only 7 campaigns of war. This blight upon the stars have slowly replaced all their mortal ranks with that of Chaos Spawn. Honoring the cohort of blood and tenets of the Scriptures of Slaughter, pilfered from the Infernal Maze, these warriors in the tens of thousands are scattered into smaller warbands far and wide to prevent themselves from culling each other in their efforts to sate their bloodlust. Each warband led by a Chaos Lord such as Galabrax, Barkor the Bloody, and the Demon Prince, Agran the Annihilator, whether depopulating planets such as Osador II, destroying 10 regiments of the Astra Militarum upon Rebus, enacting war against the Emperor's children upon Hunter's Haven, or reconsecrating the fortress world of Almarit in blood. The Skullsworn await the Blood God's roar of fury, which shall hearken the end of days. An entire branch of the Ordo Malleus established to monitor the deeds of the Skullsworn across the stars. Their efforts hope to stave off the impending era of unrelenting carnage perpetrated by these scions of Karneth. Clad in red ceramite trimmed with brass, the symbol of their warband, a black mark of corn on a field of red, belies their blunt adherence to the Blood God's influence. Last sighted following the visions of blood spawned by Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade, the portents of carnage, compelled by the Lord of Skulls, spurs the Skullsworn to enact their final 8th campaign, wherein they shall summon not a cohort, but an entire legion of Khorne to rally by their side. The Skulltakers are a Khornate warband of Chaos Space Marines. Once a loyalist chapter known as the Berserkers of Caradon, their disappearance during 153.M34 began their 5 millennia of worship to the Blood God far from the Imperium's domains. Returning to real space, spearheaded by their Styx-class heavy cruiser, the Blood Dawn, their Blood Cult elite Chaos Terminators, led by their master, Chaos Lord Zhuthor, plundered the galaxy for skulls aplenty. The largest Khornate warband deployed to the Siege of Rax of 813.M41, the subsequent 17 years of combat whittled away the defenders surrounding the Eye of Terror. Zhuthor seeking to unite all lesser warbands of the Blood God to follow his own commands. Summoning Angrath the Unbound, Lord of Bloodthirsters, to aid his campaign of violence, with aid from the Demonmancers of the Sanctified, fleeing from the campaign with the Great Demon's banishment by Lord Inquisitor Hector Rex. Humbled from Vrax, the Skulltakers would join the Khornate amalgamation known as the Holocaust, their pursuit of the Keeler Comet heralding their blood crusade, until waging war upon the cemetery world of Sirtis Minor. Suffering catastrophic losses, fighting within the Obsequia city, led by Chaos Lord Umbrag, their survivors would reorganize prior to the invasion of Ultramar, led by Warsmith Honsu of the Iron Warriors and Makar the Reborn, Demon Prince. Aiding their bloodborne followers, including the warbands of the Apostles of Minthras, Claws of Lorek, and Death Shadows, the Skulltakers regardless fought separately from their allies, facing the Ultramarines' 4th Company in battle upon the world of Talasar, and 2nd Company on the planet of Vespandor. Dispatched to Fatal Zone Mortalis missions, wherein its members were not expected to survive, their Chaos Lord, Mascara, diverted their cause to inflict the most devastating damage possible. Clad in blood-red ceramite trimmed with brass or silver, obsessively polished to a mirror sheen. The symbol of their warband, a silver, serrated double-bladed battle axe on a red field, exemplifies their need to rend their enemies into ribbons. Last sighted during Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade, these marauders' efforts helped to ensure the destruction of Cadia and the spread of the Cicatrix Maledictum. The Sons of Slaughter are a Khornate warband of Chaos Space Marines. Part of Khan the Betrayer's Butcher Horde, conglomerated from myriad fragments of the World Eater's Legion. Their efforts during the Diamor campaign would bring ruin to the Blood Angels defending its domains. Chaos Lord Zorphus of the Black Legion, usurping the initial command of Cranon the Relentless upon the world of Amethal. The Butcher Horde of Khan did what their allies could not, as the Betrayer's fury clashed with the rage of Sanguinius' sons. Clad in dark red ceramite trimmed with silver and brass, the symbol of their warband, a white sigil of Khorne on a field of red, signifies their devotion to the Lord of Skulls. The bloodlust wrought from these marauders, tearing a rent through the Immaterium, spilling demonic entities unto Diamor. Only the intervention of the Chamber Militant of the Ordo Malleus, the Grey Knights, allowed for the rupture in the warp to be sealed. The Wrath are a Khornate warband of Chaos Space Marines. Revered from the Eye of Terror to the depths of Komorra, these fell demonkin are seen by many as little more than feral beasts wrapped in ceramite skin. Cannibalizing the corpses of slain friends and foes alike with the end of their rampages, their feasts of victorious conflict are concluded with the skinning of their victims to be worn as ragged cloaks, masks, and other dire adornments. making totems of the bones of their enemies as they anoint their weapons with mixtures of vitae and organs. Mounds of skull are made as offerings to their patron, as the last vestige of the harvests of their grim rituals. Imitating the actions of the Bloodthirster are Bragax, the insensate rage. Their very souls are aflame with the creature's hatred, spurring them to eradicate new foes aplenty. Annihilating the Exodite world of Clinfane with an only 3 solar months of combat during 366.M40. Not even the intervention of Craftwell Bieltan could halt their devouring of their prey. Infamous for their involvement during the First War for Armageddon of 444.M41, fighting beside the Blades of Rage Warband and the Demon Primarch Angron. Following their repelling by the Space Wolves and Grey Knights, their rage would be unleashed upon the Tau colony of Shaun Nesh during 793.M41. Fighting beside the Eights Guard, as the Xenos' valiant defiance utterly failed to stem their bloodlust. As battle subsided, the two warbands set upon one another until all combatants were seemingly destroyed. Also known to have pursued the Harlequin Mask of the Silent Shroud during 994.M41, the disaster on Ingroth, as it would be known, waged within the Grey Canyons until aid from Craftworld Imlock aided the plight of the disciples of the Laughing God. Ultimately devoured by the summoned Bloodthirster are Bragax, such is the unimaginable malice within these warriors that even the infamously capable Harlequins failed to evade their blades. Clad in black ceramite, bone-white helmets, red greaves and pauldrons trimmed with bronze, the symbol of their warband, a bone-white sigil of corn on a field of red, belies their duty to claim skulls for the Skull Throne. Witness to the visions of blood, spawned from the creation of the Great Rift across the stars, these scions of the Blood God, compelled by promises of carnage, are drawn like moths to a flame to the Cadian Gate.
This has been a tale of the Great Imperium of Man, read by the Remembrancer. The Lord of Skulls is considered by many to be the most deadly of the gods of chaos. Its immobility within its brass citadel merely a means to forestall the end of the great game. Strength is a virtue clear for all to see for its utility, yet must be used sparingly. Its overuse seen as a proverbial hammer to solve every problem alike to a nail. Foster strength within yourself, whether physical or mental, for those who nurture such an attribute shall be ready to face many of the world's struggles. Yet be aware that strength alone does not make a powerful individual, and shall lead only to destruction should other talents be untended.